This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
All right, everybody. Hello, hello. We're gonna wait for a few more people to get on. I'm gonna do my PSAs real quickly. So, for those of you that do not know me, I am Jenny. I am the owner and the host of the Revival of America. How I do things here with the Revival of America in my podcast is basically it's about the guest voice and the people's voices, right? So. You won't hear me a lot on the podcast. So, Josh is going to come on today. He's going to talk about the silent war as well as the greatest wealth transfer in human history. So many people call it Nasara Jasara. Who knows what it's going to be called? But I'm glad you guys are all here. But again, I'm Jenny with Revival America. I'm the owner and the host, and we are being listened to everybody in over 100 countries. So if you come into this this podcast here late, you can always follow the podcast on the podcast hosts, which are iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Google, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Podbean, Riverside, and Amazon Music. Also, everybody, I do put them on all of my social media right now because I'm waiting for verifications, and I'm doing that so you get there on my legitimate accounts because unfortunately I do have imposters out there. So those are Jenny Jareed Facebook, right here on X at Jenny underscore Jareed, at J Jareed Rumble, at J Jareed Instagram, at J Jareed True Social, the Revival of America on Telegram. Do a lot of lives over there, everybody. If you want to be a part of these days with my guests, you're more than welcome to come over there and check us out. Revive America on YouTube, and then TikTok is at the official J Jareed. So with that, everybody, we're going to go ahead and wait for Josh to get in here, and we will get started. Also, to everybody, if you guys have a story or a journey, this is why I created my podcast, not only for this reason, about the children as well, because obviously that's what we're all about. If you have a story or a journey you want to tell and you've been silent, please reach out to me at the Revival of America at yahoo.com. We'll get your voices and your story on the show because remember, it's your voices, your journeys that are going to help shape this new world that we're walking right into. So hang tight, everybody. We'll wait for Josh to come in here. And in the meantime, I'd like to introduce you guys, if you don't know who Mr. Santino is, my co host and a very dear friend. How are you, Santino?
I'm doing phenomenal, Jenny. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Of course. Well, you know me, I do the podcast, and I don't stay on here forever like many of the spaces do. I come in, do my thing, and let the audience talk to the guests if we get to that point of it, and then I'm out of here. Then I may go sit in another space and listen to what other people have to say. So I
100%.
saw So what's new in your world today? I saw you popped into a couple of my other podcasts today, kind of right there at the tail end. What have you been up to today?
You know, it's
Were you busy?
I was busy today. I did a lot of odds and ends here and there, but I was watching the news. I was posting some really big stuff. You know, Pam Bondi discussing President Trump, all her achievements, all her step forwards on everything. I mean, the rests are happening. It's all positive. Same with Robert. He was doing some speaking as well. Even Elon Musk. You know, things are moving along. The rests are happening. They're all behind the scenes. They're not going to tell you everything. As well as, you know, we have the art of the deal. President Trump has made a deal with the Ukrainian president. You know, it's a stronger deal for all the minerals. That's happening as well. You know, and then we had a breaking news of Operation Lights Out. A Georgia politician among 19 arrested in multiple agency human trafficking operation. So things are moving along. That's why I'm talking about this. You know, we are making headwaves. Keep your head on a swivel. Stay positive. As well, I just want to really quickly say, can everybody please go down to the bottom of your phone? That's the bottom right. Can you please tap that and just go inside and like the space, like and share the space, quote and share the space. We have a phenomenal a speaker this evening, a host that's going to be talking about some information, and that would be great to see some more people in here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Santuno. You do that so well. Thank you. And hello, Joshua. Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. How are we all doing tonight?
Oh, fantastic. And I'm so glad you're here. I swear, you guys, if you're not following Josh, please give him a follow. He is a walking encyclopedia. He is so full of great information. So if you're feeling a little confused or you're just coming new to this movement, check out Josh. He and Alpha Warrior do a lot of things together. Alpha does come onto my show often. And Josh, this is his second time. So I'm really glad that you're here. And I was just kind of telling the audience a little bit about how kind of I run my podcast, because it's not really necessarily about my voice. It's about your voice, Josh, the guest, as well as the audience interacting with you. People's voices, right? I want them to be heard. So, Josh, tonight everybody's going to talk about the silent war. And like I said, you know, the greatest wealth transfer in human history. So we're going to let him start out and give us some information and see what kind of time he has left to go, if we can go into some Q&A with him. And that's just kind of how we roll here at the Revival of America. And I see Captain Kyle's in the house. What's up, Captain Kyle? And yeah, let's get started, Josh. So talk to us a little bit. You have been on with Alpha Warrior and been just blowing it up with some great information. And you really just kind of blow my mind every time you guys do a podcast. It's just like I said, you're a walking encyclopedia. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what they call me these days, and it's kind of laughable in a sense because I'm inside my own skin, and for me, it's just it's what's happening, and it's putting patterns together and watching what's happening over a long period of time, and then connecting all the puzzle pieces. But we are in a very interesting time within human history, human society, within the United States of America, and everything that we're witnessing right now is culminating to a crescendo that we're going to see here in the, I would say, probably the next few years. But let's kind of give a little background for everybody out there of what is actually happening right now. Right now, there's a few different versions or contexts that you can go in there. Obviously, we know what Donald Trump is doing. He's changing things up. He's producing chaos in the system. We got the tariff wars. We got the invisible silent war between China and the U.S. going on right now. We have cyber attacks happening. We have random sodium perchlorate, warehouses blowing up in Iran. There's a lot of craziness in the world. Now, interestingly enough, two authors, historian professors from Columbia University back in the 1990s, compiled 500 years of data in a book called Generations. This was Strauss and Howe were the names of the authors. The book Generations ended up being turned into something known as the Fourth Turning. And the reason is because they mapped 500 years of human history and noticed that society, culture, went in about 72 to 90 year cycles. And what that means is that every about 90 years, society collapses and then rebuilds and begins anew. And this is called the fourth turning. It's kind of like a psychological, archetypical nature of humanity, of how things move from points of strength after a post-war situation and then slowly degrade over the next few generations to where you have weak-minded people who are now in positions of power and the whole system begins to collapse. Well, interestingly enough, is we are in a fourth turning right now. We're actually at the end of the fourth turning. And the globalists for the long time, and I'll just kind of sum them up as the globalists, right? This is the New World Order, the global cabal, we can call it, I call it the old guard a lot of times. And this is the European bankers, the central bankers. This is the old elite families, the bloodlines, the old money in the world. They know about these cycles and they utilize these cycles for their own benefit to concentrate wealth and land and power. And what was being set up over the course of the last 20 years was kind of like the final shot across the bow, the sink the ship. And this in the United States of America became known as the 16-year plan. This was 8 years of Barack Obama and 8 years of Hillary Clinton that was meant to happen. And this would have been the final shot that brought about the New World Order. And we all know about these plans. It's kind of been leaked systematically over the last 20 years. But the idea was that Barack Obama lays the foundation for kind of like socialist infrastructure in the United States of America, allowing China to come in the U.S. energy infrastructure and the telecom infrastructure, as well as into our education, in the country. And then Hillary Clinton would come in and she begins a strong rhetoric with Russia. And if you remember 2015, 2016, Hillary Clinton was basically not even at the election at presidency yet, but talking nuclear war with Russia, talking about putting up missile defense shields in Poland and Ukraine, and how she was going to take out Russia and Putin remove themselves from the nuclear proliferation treaty. This is how Russia actually got more nukes than the United States because they started redeveloping them back in 2016 because of the threat of Hillary Clinton. Well, we know what happens here is Hillary Clinton doesn't win. Actually, she gets her ass handed to her by Donald Trump in the 2016 election. Now, there's certain things that came about which allowed that to happen. So there's a whole there's a preliminary part of this that I wrote in my Substack. I urge everybody to go subscribe to my Substack. I write constantly, daily, tons of research. It's redpillproject.substack.com. You can find that linked up either on my X page or redpills.tv, which is my website. But there's one post I have out there called the multi-domain battlefield. And it's the precursor to everything that we know of as like Q, the whole Q movement, but also the 2016 election. So the 2016 election came about because there's investigations to know who was selling military secrets to foreign adversaries. This derives from Uranium One deals that Hillary Clinton was brokering through Justin Trudeau's Uranium One company in Canada, which U.S. uranium was being sold off to Russia, that was proxying it to Iran under the Obama administration. This comes about with Hillary Clinton's 30,000 classified emails that include over 36 SAP programs that were given to access to her by Jake Sullivan, her her chief of staff at the time of the State Department, of which included high-level military technology that we believe was exotic military technology that was being reverse engineered, obviously not from origin of this planet. And these military people were trying to find out what was going on with all this. Well, they got shut down in and around 2012. If you guys all remember this incident that occurred at the National Security Agency, a special program, the National Security Agency, a SAP program, Special Access Program, being run and funded by the Department of Defense, known as Project Prism. What ended up happening is one of John Brennan's proteges was sent over to the NSA. He infiltrated the program, whether he knowingly did it or not knowingly did it. He exposed the program. And if you remember the headlines, they were spying on senators, they were spying on congressmen, bureaucrats, they were spying on military generals, and then they claimed they were spying on U.S. citizens. They were also spying on foreign nationals, and they were collecting the data of all different types of electronic communications. This was a SAP program developed by the U.S. military, hidden and funded when the Barack Obama administration came in to uncover the deep state. So if you go back to Joe M's video about how he was talking about how the NSA data collection was collecting all this data, this is what they were talking about. And the group that had legal precedence over that SAP program is known as the Q group at the NSA. So kind of just to give you a little preliminary of that idea. Well, that got shut down in 2012. Then things began to fall apart for kind of what we would consider to be the patriots in this. So they knew that they had to bring about a strong candidate for the 2016 election. They had one chance to go in there and make things happen. There was, from what I gather from my sources and people that are very, very close to this, and I'm very well connected in this world, is that there was a brokerage of a deal made between Turkey. Erdogan, the president of Turkey, was in good relations with Vladimir Putin. And a deal was made that if Vladimir Putin shut down the servers that were trying to steal the 2016 election, then sanctions would be released and, we could move into a multipolar world. On election night in 2016 at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Russians shut down servers that were operating in the eastern Donbass region of Ukraine at a company called Burisma. There was a server there from a company called CrowdStrike, which was operated by the DNC. Now, why would the DNC have a CrowdStrike server in Burisma in eastern Ukraine? Well, it was the one running Hammer and Scorecard, or the various different types of virtual machines that spool up on all the tabulator machines in the United States and help to steal the election. At that point in time, it wasn't running out of Serbia, it was running out of eastern Ukraine. And the Russians shut this down at exactly 9 p.m. on election night that night. That's why Donald Trump pulled ahead that night in and around that time frame. Now, interestingly enough, people are probably putting two and two together here, saying Burisma, isn't that the company that Devin Archer and Hunter Biden and John Kerry's stepson all worked at? Isn't that the same business that Shogun in Ukraine was investigating, that Joe Biden had the quid pro quo and shut down? Yes, it is. Now, the interesting part about all of that is that the second impeachment of Donald Trump in 2019 came about because of the perfect phone call with President Zelensky in Ukraine. And if you remember, it was Eric Cimarella and Vindman who are the ones that became the whistleblowers through Adam Schiff. Now, the interesting part about that is that Cimarella was actually John Brennan's protege in 2014 that helped sign the receipts for the Maidan massacre that happened in Ukraine to overthrow Ukraine and have the coup there. And Vindman, obviously, former Ukrainian national, came into the United States of America, got into intelligence. But the reason why they went after Donald Trump was because of something he said in that phone call. And remember, they released transcript. It was this. Donald Trump asked President Zelensky, he says, do you have the server? CrowdStrike, Burisma. I'd like to have my DOJ take a look at it. And they immediately went to a second impeachment against Donald Trump over that one singular comment, because that pertains to everything that happened in 2016 with Hillary Clinton trying to actually steal the election, which we dodged a bullet with that. But Donald Trump knew that the first 4 years, his first term, was not going to be the golden age. It was not going to be what everybody thought it was going to be. It was really just kind of disrupting the system so other things could happen. Those other things that needed to happen were humanity needed to wake up. America needed to wake up. And a message needed to be sent to begin this process of taking back the idea of information. The real war that is being fought right now is the information war. And if you go back to General Flynn's digital soldiers comment, we have an army of digital soldiers. This is what it was all about. You had to dismantle the mainstream media, and Donald Trump set the precedent with that by calling it fake news and continuing to process that and then calling out their lies. And as the movement began to increase, they ended up trying to censor all of us. And in the midst of censoring all of us, they defeated themselves, because we went out there and sought alternative technologies and alternative platforms. We went out there and created decentralized podcasts. excuse me, so that we could still communicate and we could still get the information out there and the people followed. This collapsed the mainstream media. This collapsed the mainstream social platforms, which means that the infrastructure that was put in place, the information infrastructure of the New World Order, of the globalists, that they were utilizing to integrate the one world government, to psychologically manipulate American and global society, was being dismantled from the inside as the users pulled out of it and sought truth over fiction. So going back to 2016, Putin shuts that down. Obviously, the 16-year plan doesn't happen. We have the great disruptor, Donald Trump, that comes in. And then in 2020, obviously, we have COVID that hits, which is nothing more than a massive psychological warfare operation, a preliminary run on artificial intelligence and facial recognition integration, as well as the idea of ID 2020, of global identification network that would promote digital identification. So this was that dry run and all of that, but also to coup Donald Trump at the same time. And they did a incredible job of it, stealing the 2020 election. And they did it through information warfare. They did it through the last straws that they had, and they did it with help from China. And we know this because of D&I Radcliffe's report that came out on January 19th, 2021, stating that China directly interfered with the 2020 election, but it was directly ignored because of the events that happened, quote unquote, happened on January 6th. But January 6th, well, there's some interesting things about that, but we're not going to get into that tonight. Anyways, what happens next is the next 4 years become incredibly pertinent to what is happening right now. Why? Because everybody just watched the largest psyop in the world that woke up millions, if not billions, of people worldwide to this globalist agenda. That was COVID-19. Next, in the midst of all that, they watched them steal the election from Donald Trump, which brought the truth to the surface that the United States is not a constitutional republic. In anything, it is closely resembled as a democracy, but more operated as a deep state, as an oligarchy that controls and operates all political functions. So people began to wake up, and Donald Trump began to continue to promote his message. He started his rallies off. And at the end of the 4 years, going into 2024, there's one thing you can look back on. And Alpha and I did a show with General Flynn. And, well, actually, we did a show with Patrick Byrne, and then we did a show with General Flynn. I recommend everybody watch both of those. But the show with Patrick Byrne came out and said something that really struck me, because it was everything, all my research has culminated in that one moment. He says, General Flynn is a master at movement warfare. And when he left the White House in 2017, that was his job and his task, movement warfare. And if you look back at what General Flynn has done over the last 8 years, it is absolutely profound. Whether you like these people or not, or believe they're great people or not, I don't care. They went about there and they created an integrated network of people, of churches, of institutions, of organizations that all work together to spread the message, get the word out, and bring people into one idea of Donald Trump needs to be president in 2025. And they did this from the grassroots organically, and they did it to a point of perfection, people. So when we get into what happened in 2024, Donald Trump wins the election. Obviously, we have Butler, all this stuff. Well, after Butler, PA, some interesting things begin to happen. We begin to see the toppling of the global system. I call this the multi-headed hydra. The people of the world are the body, and you have these heads that come off of this hydra, and each head is a different faction, and each faction has its own ideology, whether it's the Satanists, whether it's the bankers, the technocrats, whatever it might be. These are all the factions that sit at the table and try to decide what's going to happen next in the world. This is the Trilateral Commission. This is the Club of Rome. This is the Bilderberg groups. This is the World Economic Forum. This is the heads of the Hydra. After Butler, PA, something interesting began to happen, and I began to see this happen really fast. is these heads of the Hydra began to capitulate to Donald Trump. First, we saw Silicon Valley, then we saw big, tech companies, then we saw Wall Street, and then various other globalist countries started coming together. And we started seeing globalists kind of be picked off and losing power everywhere. Now, there was deals made during that point in time. And I actually pointed this out 2 days after the Butler assassination attempt. I came out and said that Joe Biden had made a deal with Donald Trump. Didn't know too much about the deal, but I knew there was a deal made. And a few days later, RFK Jr. puts out a video. He actually didn't put it out. His son put it out. A videographer was taping it. It was intentional, people. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was planned by Trump and RFK Jr. But RFK is sitting there on the phone talking to Donald Trump and talks about how Donald Trump is sitting there saying that when he went to Butler, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden called him and they were laughing. They were talking. They were getting along. That makes no sense because 2 weeks earlier, they're at each other's throats wanting to fight each other behind the playground. The deal that was made was that Joe Biden was going to step down and endorse Kamala Harris. We know that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were trying to get Joe Biden to step down, but they did not want him to endorse anybody, and they were going to go for an open convention at the DNC, of which Hillary Clinton and Michelle Obama would have rose up as the candidacy because they're the only ones that had any polling that could have defeated Donald Trump, or at least brought it close enough for them to steal the election. With Joe Biden endorsing Kamala Harris, it sealed the deal. They knew Harris couldn't win, and that was it. And the dominoes began to fall, and these factions began to capitulate to Donald Trump. Now let's fast forward. Donald Trump gets inaugurated, and all hell breaks loose on that day. The reason is because from the time frame of 2015 to 2025, and all the time that Donald Trump was president before that or not president, he never once mentioned how USAID was corrupt, needed to be shut down, was utilized for money laundering operations, funded or NGOs that were corrupt to the core, embezzling money into dark money programs and funding protests and terrorism. Not once did he mention that. He knew it, but he never mentioned it. The reason he didn't mention it because he knew that coming back in his second term, that if there was the potential that he was going to win, the Democrats would begin funneling all types of money into USAID to basically secure their position for 2026 and 2028. And so on January 21st, 2025, Donald Trump seized all money at USAID and all funding, and the Democrats lost their head. Now, this was one of the foundational strategic moves that Donald Trump did, because that one move right there completely annihilated the Democrat Party, the deep state, and the deep intelligence apparatus that operates outside of them. Act Blue is the next big one that is coming down. And by the way, if people don't understand, Act Blue that is going for prosecution right now at the DOJ, Donald Trump was just talking about this the other day. You have to understand that over 60% of all fundraising for the Democrat Party comes through Act Blue. That the Democrats, right before the midterm elections, are going to lose their largest super PAC. Not only that, is there's going to be indictments to sitting congressmen and senators because of Act Blue being knowingly brought over from foreign countries, China, into Act Blue. Not only the corruption that was occurring there of them spoofing people's credit card numbers through NGOs and private organizations that was nothing more than laundered USAID money. Oh, we don't even want to get into this. This is one of the reasons they wanted Doge and Elon Musk to get into the Treasury payment system so they could find out the accounts that all this money went into. Another thing you'll probably be hearing about is citizens on paper only and employees on paper only. Ways that the Democrats launder money out of the U.S. government. You create fictitious entities, fictitious people, fictitious employees. You hire them, you pay them a salary, you put that money into a bank account, and that money gets pulled out, and someone's collecting it. Doge found this out when Elon was sending that email out telling people give me a list of the 5 things you did this week, and all those people never responded. The reason those people never responded is because those employees don't exist. Those employees were hired through these various different rogue agencies, collecting paychecks and benefits, and someone was collecting that money. Hence why the Democrats freaked out when Elon was trying to get into the treasury payment system. So number one is you're seeing the systematic destruction of the deep state, the Democrat Party right now in the United States of America. The next part that I'm going to get into, this is where it gets really incredible of what is happening. Because once we start talking about what Donald Trump is doing, we start seeing the bigger picture here. Now, Donald Trump is focusing on 3 global parts in his battle, if you want to look at it like that. Canada, European Union, and China. These are the top 3 people. And the reason is because Canada is heavily influenced by the European Union and as well as controlled and dominated politically by China. The European Union is economically dependent upon China and politically infiltrated by China. There's a great article that came out about this just a few weeks ago. I did a blog about this as well. So these are just nothing more than proxies on the political front for China. Now, if you've never heard of it, there's something known as the Belt Roads Initiative, the Silk Road, the New Silk Road article 2019 came out with the World Economic Forum. It coincides directly with the Belt Roads Initiative that China put out of their 100-year plan. But China wants to not be a superpower. China wants to be a hyperpower. They want to be the only superpower in the world. And for the last 20 years, they've been working to this point to be exactly that. And that comes about through honeypotting, information warfare, infiltrating various governments and societies, killing off entire races of people with genocide and fentanyl and chemicals and all this different stuff. So Donald Trump understood that in order to hurt China, which is I look at China as the globalist head. If you want to look at the New World Order as an oligarchical organization of these old guard European central bankers and financiers, China is their model government. It is their capital country. It is their military, their economic, and their political center. And so you have to cut the head off of the snake. That is the snake right there. But at the same time, you have to dismember the body. That's Canada and that's the European Union. And so what Donald Trump has been doing with tariffs is actually quite interesting. If you ever read The Art of the Deal, you'll realize that Donald Trump negotiates at what we call extreme levels, hoping for a midline. So he comes out there at the most extreme levels that you could ever imagine, and he sticks to his gun, just reinforcing those extreme levels. Hence, reciprocal tariffs against China, 247%, etc. What that does is it hurts people and brings them to the table to where they want to negotiate, and they always settle for some mid-level agreement to where the United States is probably not going to have a trade deficit with that country at that point. Now, in the midst of all of this, there is one organization that is actually getting hurt, and it's not China. It's not the European Union. It's the central banks. See, the central banks operate on a fictitious idea of money. We all know how the fiat system works. But I want you to see this from the perspective of how central banks operate. A central bank has what's known as the banking rate, and they loan money to large financial institutions, and large financial institutions distribute that money to various different multinational conglomerates and corporations and other types of banks to lend it out to everybody else. Well, if you have $1 billion worth of crude oil sitting in Saudi Arabia that needs to make its way over to the United States of America, it's got to cross across the ocean. It's got to come into the port. That crude oil's got to get put on trains and tractor trailers. It's got to be driven across the country to oil refineries. It's got to be produced in the gasoline, put back on tankers and trucks, and then shipped out to gas stations, put into your vehicle, before somebody gets paid for it. Well, guess what? Saudi Arabia wants their $1 billion now, not a year down the road when that gas is actually going to be utilized. So how do companies get that short-term money, that $1 billion of short-term money to buy that oil? Well, they take it out from these large financial organizations at the Fed rate. This comes directly from the central banks. So when you start talking about tariffs increasing, this is killing the ability for these central banks to loan money because all these corporations are now seeing a problem with this. Hey, look, it's going to cost me $20 more a barrel now to get gasoline from Saudi Arabia. So I'm just going to go set up shop in the United States of America and start buying U.S. oil because I'm going to save, $50 a barrel or whatever it might be. So the idea is that you start dismantling this globalist system of manufacturing and processing that brought about all of our trade deals. And that's what Donald Trump's doing. And what that's doing is producing jobs to leave China, number one, because of the high tariffs, and have jobs move back into the United States, including manufacturing and processing, which helps America, but also strengthens our GDP, strengthens our economy, and brings more jobs, increases the cost of living, brings down the cost of products. So there's a lot of interesting things happening here. But I want you also to see that the next moves that Donald Trump is making with this are incredibly strategic. So we just talked a little bit about China and who and what China are. A few months ago, I put out a post and I did a podcast on it that once Donald Trump comes into the White House, China's going to have 3 decisions to make because Donald Trump plays game theory and he eliminates all the strengths of his opponents and forces them down a route that he already has counter moves for and can checkmate you. So China's going to have 3 decisions to make. One of 3 decisions to make. One, they can acquiesce and capitulate to Donald Trump and join the multipolar world and bring fair trade deals amongst everybody, and we could, thrive in the new technology that's being developed, and we could all live happily ever after. China's not going to do that. Number 2 is China can do nothing, and ultimately they would economically collapse, and the CCP would collapse. That's not going to happen. C, China can go to war. And that's actually the option that China has chosen. Whether you realize it or not, we are in a silent war right now with China. It is economic, it is informational, and cyber right now. And it is expanding very, very fast, and it's coming to this crescendo that we're talking about. Now, let's kind of go over this basis. The real threat to this world is the globalists, the central bankers, the New World Order. China is the capital city, capital country of that, which is promoting that and working towards that agenda. Donald Trump has already put in place various different types of economic ideas that are beginning to dismantle that system and deregulate, in context, the Fed, of how the Fed operates. It's making it very chaotic for them to do their jobs. Now, China has only a few moves left if they do not negotiate a removal of U.S. trade deficit. The 2 moves that China has left that comes next are, number 1, dumping of U.S. treasuries back on the market, which we already saw, and I believe it's next week that those numbers are going to come out. And number 2 is the invasion of Taiwan or a trade embargo on the Taiwanese Straits. These are the only 2 options that Donald Trump has left China with. China right now has had over 156 massive manufacturing and processing plants leave China. They are losing hundreds of thousands of jobs. Economically, they are not doing good. Their banks are on the brink of collapse. The CCP is about to have a major problem. So they have to move to the next stage of either
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
invading Taiwan for a trade embargo, which brings them back to the negotiation table with Donald Trump and tries to coerce or force him to drop the tariffs and alleviate that pressure. Or they're going to start dumping of U.S. treasuries massively back on the market. Well, Donald Trump wants them to dump U.S. Treasuries back on the market. And let me give you an idea of other moves that Donald Trump has already done in this context. When the stock market was dropping over the last few months, over $12 trillion was removed from the U.S. stock market. Now, a lot of that has been bought back up, but it wasn't bought back up by the same people who pulled their money out. If you go and find out that the majority, over $10 trillion of value, was removed from the U.S. stock market was from European central banks. I'll say that again. It was from European central banks. And then who bought it up? U.S. companies and corporations and U.S. people. Okay, well, then our debt is through U.S. bonds and treasuries, which China and other countries like the European Union are dumping back onto the market, and the Fed is forced to buy them back up. So in 3 months, here's your perspective for you. In 3 months, Donald Trump repatriated U.S. companies back here into the United States of America and U.S. debt back here in the United States of America, which means that he removed the liability of U.S. corporations and U.S. debt from foreign adversaries. That is highly strategic. This is why he was telling Powell that you need to lower interest rates, because he knows that once the U.S. Treasuries begin flooding back into the market, Powell is going to be forced to lower interest rates, which is going to stabilize the U.S. economy all over again. Now, this is obviously dismantling the euro system, and the Europeans don't like this. China is seeking to make massive strategic investments in Europe, but it's not going to be the same as what they had here in the United States of America. And there's other type of precautionary things that we have to look at. And we're going to get into the war aspect here in a second. But I want you to show you why Donald Trump is dismantling the central banking system and why he's disrupting the global economy. 2 executive orders that Donald Trump put out there. One is called the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and one is called the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. These are moving to be codified into law by Congress. Now, right before Butler, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump met at Mar-a-Lago with the president of Qatar. Once he got into the White House, Qatar and Saudi Arabia sent a whole bunch of their people who are subject matter experts on sovereign wealth funds to the United States of America to help us develop our own sovereign wealth fund. Within this time, he's secured over $2.1 trillion of investments into various different parts of the United States, specifically enabling Texas for quantum computing and artificial intelligence infrastructure. He's negotiated various different mineral deals, the newest one being in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the United States just negotiated peace with Rwanda rebel groups, and the president of the Congo offered Donald Trump their mineral rights to do that. He just negotiated the Eastern Donbass, Ukraine mineral rights. He wants to go after Canada because Canada is rich in liquid natural gas as well as rare earth minerals and metals. He wants Greenland because Greenland's rich in rare earth minerals and metals. In the United States of America alone, we have $124 trillion worth of rich natural resources right under our feet, that this next big bill that he's talking about is going to remove the regulations so that U.S. companies can begin pulling it out. Well, here's the kicker for everybody. That those companies that are taking the trillions of dollars of investments that Donald Trump negotiated, the sovereign wealth fund is going to reap dividends from the patents and from the technology that's developed of that for hundreds of years. All those resources that are being pulled out of the ground and all those new resource deals that we're getting, are the profits and dividends are going to be fed into the sovereign wealth fund. So we start seeing that the sovereign wealth fund attached with the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is exactly that. It is a wealth fund to fund government. It is a wealth fund to help and support the American people. So I've done calculated estimates on this, okay, with the current valuation, and a very conservative valuation, is if they bring Bitcoin and all of these resources into the sovereign wealth fund and then migrate Social Security directly into it, within 10 years, each American will be paid out approximately $40,000 a year. Within 50 years, the average net worth of every American will be approximately $1.5 to $2.5 million because of the sovereign wealth fund. I want you to understand that, because what we're about to see is a technological singularity in this world. Donald Trump knows it. Elon Musk knows it. All these people know it. This has been planned for a long time. We're about to take a quantum leap in fucking technology, people. I don't think people are even ready and can grasp and understand where we are going to be in just 5 years. So, in 10 years, about 60% of the workforce of the world population is going to be displaced because of artificial intelligence and automation. Within 20 years, we'll be close to 85 to 90%. What does that mean? It means that people have to find new jobs and reskill and find new places of labor. There's going to be two different market dynamics. There's going to be automated market dynamics, which is going to bring about cheap products that are low cost but proficiently made, and then there's going to be American made products, or there's going to be man-made products. In other words, you can go to a barber that is an AI that's going to cut your hair and you're going to pay $10, or you can go to the woman down the street who's going to cut your hair and it's going to be 3 times that amount. That's the type of economy that we're headed towards. They know this, which means that if you look at it from a socialist principle, you need something called universal basic income to substantiate all of that. Well, there's a way better idea than the government just giving people money to control them. The better idea is monetizing the resources of a country, having the fruits of the labor, a meritocracy, the fruits of the labor of that country be paid into a large fund that is earning interest and dividends year after year, and then paying those dividends out to the people of that country, just like Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, Venezuela used to do. Well, that's where we're headed. And this is what Donald Trump's doing. But in order to do that, a few things have to happen. Number one is, obviously, it's going to get rid of federal income taxes. It's going to get rid of the IRS. That is already in progress. Trump's already talking about that. But the other thing is you have to dismantle the central banking system. And this is what we're seeing right now. So how do we dismantle the central banking system? There's an economic concept out there called the rehypothecation of gold theory. This idea comes about that, let's say that Santino has an ounce of gold and he loans that ounce of gold to Jenny. On Santino's books, he still has an ounce of gold. Now Jenny has the ounce of gold, and on her books, she has an ounce of gold. So now 1 ounce of gold just produced 2 ounces of gold. Well, now Jenny lets me borrow that ounce of gold, and I have an ounce of gold on my books. So now there's 3 ounces of gold, but actually one physical piece, 1 ounce of gold. Well, now Santino comes back to the table and says, hey guys, I need that gold back. So Jenny has to go to me. I have to give it to Jenny back to Santino, and Santino rehypothecates that gold back into his holding, and we have to remove it from our books. That is in progress right now, the rehypothecation of gold around the world. The other side of it is attached to the the strategic Bitcoin reserve bill that is being proposed. It's still in committee in Congress, is one little paragraph of utmost importance. This is on my X feed somewhere if you scroll down. It says something like this: that the 12 Federal Reserve banks must send all gold certificates held into the U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury will reissue new gold certificates and send them back out to the 12 Federal Reserve banks, but will be rechanging the pegging amount of gold from $42 an ounce, which was negotiated at the Bretton Woods Agreement in the 1940s, and repegging it to current market value, which is somewhere near $3,500. You have to understand what that means. The second part of it is that bill states that once the Federal Reserve banks receive the new gold certificates pegged at that $3,500 or current market value, they have to pay the difference to the U.S. Treasury. You're talking a few $1 trillion here, people. Well, firstly, that's not going to be in Federal Reserve notes. The Fed doesn't have the overhead, the capital to do this. This will kill the Fed, and that's exactly what it's meant to do. But you also have to remember that the Fed just rehypothecated all U.S. debt because the treasuries are being dumped on the market and the Fed's buying it up. So it brings a point of negotiation on U.S. debt with the Fed back in the principle, to where Donald Trump utilizing the art of the deal in extremes, can go in there and basically either take over the Fed internally, remove them systematically, watch them collapse, and already have the new platform and system in place, or we can just urge Congress to repeal 12 USC and remove them outright because there's no need for them since a new economic system and monetary system are already in place with the sovereign wealth fund. The other idea of the sovereign wealth fund for everybody out there is that the US dollar is no longer going to be backed upon the good faith of the United States government and issued by the Federal Reserve, which, by the way, came out in 1933, Joint House Resolution 129, which basically got rid of the gold-backed dollar and brought the Federal Reserve note in place. Instead, that joint resolution is going to be repealed, and the U.S. dollar will now be an asset-backed currency, very similar to the SDR buckets that the IMF uses. In other words, all of those assets in the strategic Bitcoin reserve and the sovereign wealth funds will now back the US dollar, including gold. Well, you just made the Federal Reserve absolutely obsolete in one fell swoop of the pen, and you just strengthened the US economy 1,000 times over by doing that. This is what Donald Trump is doing right now. Now, you have to understand is how does that interfere with the whole global system? It collapses globalism altogether. It gives pathways for all these various different developing countries and even first world countries to get out of this globalist system, including China. Now, China has a deep state, just like the United States has or had a deep state, and they are working right now to disrupt this system that Donald Trump is trying to do. One of the key components here is the Middle East, and I don't think people are looking at this too intelligently. A lot of pressure is being put on Iran right now. I just put out a 2-piece blog on my Substack about Iran specifically. Now, if you remember, President Raisi died in a helicopter crash back in June, July. He was not killed because his helicopter was in fog. He was killed by Khamenei in Iran, the Ayatollah. It was an internal coup to remove Raisi because Raisi was making plans to overthrow Khamenei after his death when his son was going to be a successor, and Raisi was going to secure power directly back. Raisi, by the way, as well, was the first point of communication for the West. He was in communication with the United States. He was in communication with Israel. So anytime Iran was going to strike Israel or the U.S., military bases or anything like that, he would always communicate the targets prior to that happening. We knew that there was backdoor communications. One of the generals, Abraham Arizi, was put on house arrest in Iran. He was a general commander of the IRGC. So Iran had an internal coup going on. It got thwarted late last year. But in the midst of all of that, there are 3 proxy organizations around the world. Hezbollah has been completely annihilated. Hamas has been completely destroyed. And the Houthis are in process of being destroyed. If everybody saw that big Chinese plane that landed in Beirut yesterday, that is Chinese military weapons moving in to fund the Houthis. Now, why is China funding the Houthis? Well, it's proxy against the United States and against the West. Well, what just happened in Iran a few days ago? A port warehouse blew up. They said it was mishandling of chemicals. What kind of chemicals, do you ask? Sodium perchlorate. Well, what is sodium perchlorate? It is the precursor to ammonium perchlorate, which is the fuel for Iranian ballistic missiles. 2 days prior to this, Iran had received large shipments of sodium perchlorate and ballistic missile supply parts from China directly into that warehouse. That warehouse blew up with all those parts in it. Now, why does that matter? 6 months ago, Israel had strategic strikes all throughout Iran that took out the ballistic missile development plants of Iran and a lot of their inventory of ballistic missiles, which means that if Iran got in a war right now, they wouldn't last very long and they don't have the means to produce new missiles. Those parts that just came in were their ability to reproduce new missiles, even to attach a nuke to one. And China is the one that gave it to them. And what happened? Israel, over the last weekend, took that whole facility out, delaying Iran's plans to redevelop ballistic missiles. Well, why is that important? Because we have the renegotiations that are happening right now between the U.S. and Iran. Iran, Ayatollah was never going to take this deal. But now the fact that they know that they cannot get into a larger regional war, that they cannot last in a war against the United States, they're fucking sitting ducks and they're pretty fucked right now. They either have to take the deal, or if they don't, they know that the United States is going to come in and bomb the shit out of their missile sites, out of their nuke sites, and Iran's going to be done. Well, here's the problem that nobody's seeing. China is heavily dependent economically on Iran. 70% of Chinese oil comes from Iran at highly discounted rates. Iran is dependent economically on China because China is the only buyer of Iranian oil and the means of ways getting around Western sanctions. So they need each other. Also, militarily, Iran feeds China drone, and then China feeds Iran ballistic missiles information. So what's happening right now is that if China gets cut off from Iranian oil, China cannot last more than 100 days. They'll be forced to buy directly on the open market through OPEC, which they don't have the liquidity within their markets to do. Secondly, the West controls the OPEC markets. Donald Trump can easily go to OPEC and tell them, hey, no more dealing with China. And then China's out. And it's basically a kind of a way to sanction China without really sanctioning China by cutting off Iranian oil. But the move on Iran to overthrow Ayatollah Khamenei, to install Western friendly governments, is a move against China. Because strategically, China needs Iran in order to remain a global superpower. So we're seeing that right now. And then immediately after this, by the way, we saw this power outage in Europe and Portugal and Spain. That was China. The REN grid operator, by the way, was a Chinese-owned company up until 2021, which ran Chinese components in its grid to this current date. That was a warning from China to the Donald Trump, the United States of America, to back the fuck off and lay the pressure off tariffs, which Donald Trump is not going to back down. So that brings us to the dark part of it, that we potentially are moving into a point where social, cultural destabilization, political destabilization is going to be prompted. The Democrats are absolutely dead. They're completely defunded. Act Blue is collapsing. All of their corruption is being exposed. We have potential arrests from Crossfire Hurricane to election fraud, all coming down the pipeline in the next few weeks to few months. And the only option right now for the globalists in the deep state is to activate their sleeper cells throughout the United States that were brought over the border over the last 4 years. This is Chinese military-age men, 18 to 25. This is Tren de Agua. This is cartels, La Raza. This is, excuse me, this is African militants trained in Chinese military camps. This is Middle Eastern terrorist groups that are all spread throughout the United States of America, that are all waiting for pro-Palestine, anti-Israel protests to break out into riots, and for them to get activated. And once activated, then martial law and the Insurrection Act have to get applied. And that's when they try to really hammer Donald Trump at that point in time, but completely destabilize the United States of America in the midst of all this. And it'll all be being done by the globalists and by China. Now, I believe Donald Trump has a plan for that. That's why we know Tom Homan's team at ICE and DHS are working with Delta Force and other special operators are with those teams. This is why we have 20,000 U.S. troops on the southern border with all different types of military capabilities there. When border crossings have reduced by 97%, why are we putting more troops there? Because they're instantly deployable anywhere in the United States of America. They're also fending off the potential for invasion, because Donald Trump knows the risks of what he is doing, and he knows the next move of his adversaries and opponents. So we're coming into a really critical junction here. The next 6 months are going to be fucking incredible. Excuse my French.
You're good.
I think I just talked for 53 minutes, and my voice is hurting a little bit. But I will subside and let any questions come in.
Oh, Josh, that was awesome. So everybody, I think by what Josh, I have 2 pages of notes here going on my third. If you guys aren't excited by what Josh just broke down for you guys, I don't know what to tell you. I think you should. And for those that have the people that don't want to listen or hear you, give them this podcast because this was fire, everybody. So if you guys have questions, Josh will take a couple questions. So please feel free to request. I will unmute your mic. And I don't know, Josh, I just want to say that was freaking awesome. Thank you. Go ahead, Cassandra. Your mic's unmuted. Go ahead, Cassandra. Can you speak?
Yeah, I can. Josh, my God, man. First of all, I need to get onto your little subby stack because that was absolute fire. You speak with absolute clarity, and I just really appreciate the confidence that you bring to the room. I think a lot of us have gotten kind of slipped into this phrase that we say, "Oh, trust the plan," and it's a really, really tight walk. Yes, we have a plan, but we also have live active agents that are on the ground trying to protect the plan. And that is evident. I agree with you on the taking down the global establishment, the rehypothecation of the gold. I'm really glad that you pointed that out. Now, I'm just really curious from your point of view. I'm going to be honest, I'm all in on XRP and I did sell all my Bitcoin. But when we look at the trace with the CIA and NASA and all of the inroads of Bitcoin, do we see that staying around? Or do you see that being destabilized, keeping gold intact? And what role do you see Bitcoin kind of flushing out this reserve based on the debt that you just talked about?
Great question. Um, you guys probably don't know this about me. I've been in cryptocurrency since 2017. I teach crypto masterminds every Sunday on my private social network that we have, the socialredpill.com. And I consult in blockchain, AI, and crypto world. Um, Let me kind of explain Bitcoin really simply. Bitcoin is completely different than any cryptocurrency that you know of. It's it is not a cryptocurrency. It is a monetary policy. All right. Um, the pricing of Bitcoin, of how far it's going to go up in price if mass adopted, which it already is there. With the built-in scarcity models, the energy utilization models of algorithmic function of how it operates, we know Bitcoin is going to go to 1 million. We know Bitcoin will probably go to 5 million in the next 50 to 60 years. With that being said, everybody needs to go out there and buy some Bitcoin. It is quite literally digital gold. Now, you asked, how is it going to be utilized? Number one is I think it's going to be a savings backing, as in it's a hedge against inflation. We're not going to have to really worry about that much anymore. But think about it in the aspect of the sovereign wealth fund. Is that you accumulate, you hodl, you accumulate, you hodl, and what's happening is it's going up in value, and therefore you have dividends to get distributed from that. You have aspects of lending, but it's going to produce a whole new financial ideal that is going to come about. Um, Bitcoin is unlike anything that is in existence right now, any other cryptocurrency, even XRP. Now, I know a lot of people are big on XRP and all in on XRP. We hear all the time XRP is doing this deal or doing this deal, or, they're working with the country of Germany. The Bank of International Settlements came out and they had the Unified Ledger Framework. And look at that. XRP is in there working with CBDCs and central banks. Well, guess what? Donald Trump outlawed CBDCs. There's not going to be any CBDCs in the United States of America. But also, it's the XRP ledger, XRPL, that is the most important part of all of that, that is being mimicked by a lot of these financial institutions and utilizing XRP as a consulting agency for that. My hopes for XRP, I think XRP is going to be a good short-term investment, and that's what I tell people. And the reason I say it's a short-term investment is because the majority of the cryptocurrencies that are on the planet right now that we know of, Ethereum, XRP, XLM, the ones that were created back in 2014, 2013, 2015, they're antiquated technologies. They were technologies developed at a time to resolve problems of yesterday. And they've had a hard time transitioning into the world of tomorrow. With quantum computing, artificial intelligence coming out and us moving towards an economic singularity or a technological singularity, and those two things going to be completely integrated into all of our technology, blockchain integration then requires a minimum of 2 to 3 million transactions per second, TPS framework, for those types of data sets to actually operate. Now, currently, there's only a few cryptocurrencies blockchains that can actually handle that. Solana, Sui, Cardano, to name a few. So we have to start understanding that the technology advancements that we're going to have over the next 5 to 10 years are really going to dictate how our financial and economic systems operate. But in the realm of blockchain and cryptocurrency, a lot of these projects will probably be absorbed or not around much longer over the course of the next 5 years as new technologies come around and get integrated. At least that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that Solana goes down when they have a heavy caseload of money running through their system. And, I can appreciate your view on Bitcoin. I have a little bit of a differentiated view. I think what we see happening right now, even within the dark market, where you have acquisition of a lot of these XRP and others being accumulated without it being front facing on the market. I think we've got a lot of. I think here's how I explain it. There's a lot of roads in, there's a few roads out, and then there's only one road back in. And I think with Bitcoin, my opinion, outside of the ethical aspect of it, is it's a rock and a hard place. You have all these people that put all this money into it, and if you wipe it right out, you're going to have a lot of people pissed off and in the streets. It'll be interesting to see if they wrap it and bring it into the system. But I just personally don't see it as an antiquated offer such as XRP, moving the money as fast as you can and as quickly and as cheap as you can. So I'm really going to be curious on how that all plans out. I really appreciate your perspective. And if you can kind of share with people too, kind of where to find your Substack and kind of keep up on this. What's really pointing home for me, Josh, is what you shared about what's going on cross seas, how China's being backed into the corner, and at the same time trying to play their pass peg on their military, which that's going to be it's going to be a tightrope for them as well. So thank you so much. I'd just like to get all the real estate out of the U.S. so that we can acquire all of the things that they've bought up and get our nation back. So I appreciate you so much, and thank you for your insights.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that. And yeah, I will. I will post below this space my links. If you actually if you guys just go to my page, the pinned post that's right there should have all my links. If you just go to redpills.tv, that's just spell it out, REDPILLS.tv. At the bottom of the page, there's two buttons. One says support and one says social. You can find everywhere we are at there. And then in the upper menu bar, you can see our Substack and all that stuff. It's all right there. So you can use that for navigation.
One more quick question, Josh. I asked this to Captain Kyle down there, and I see you down there, Captain Kyle. I asked this on Jenny's podcast today. I'm in Minnesota, and Tim Walz is apparently going to be running for president, and he thinks he's got a pretty big chance of taking that. How do you see all of these local, we all say we want to be in community and take control and be in leadership, but I don't see a lot of leaders right now. I see a lot of people that are checked out and really anxious and depressed. So could you give your insight on what happens at the local levels with government as we start taking out all these fuckers off of the top line down once we start rallying them up? If you can give your feedback on that, I'd love your input.
Well, interestingly enough, I live in Minnesota. Just FYI. And Tim Walz has zero chance of becoming president. And you're right, Minnesota's Republican Party is in shambles. Royce White, if anybody doesn't know him, he ran against Amy Klobuchar. He is one of the probably the top contenders, I think, in Minnesota that should run for governor. He's an awesome dude, former NBA player, and great conservative Christian guy that definitely deserves a shot and support. And he's trying to help dismantle the Minnesota Republican Party, which is nothing more than an extension of the Democrat Party. And throughout every state, I think we have a really similar thing. I know in Colorado, I used to live there. That was the same thing, is that the Republican parties are nothing more than extensions or proxies of the Democrat parties, because the Democrat parties had just such amplified funding. Now we know how. Obviously, they were embezzling taxpayer dollars through USAID, through NGOs and private organizations and money laundering. But either way, you know, your concern is right, that people have to get passionate about politics and rise up, and they have to start at the grassroots, and they have to take back their county boards and their county positions and their city positions, and they have to run for state house, and they have to overthrow these people who are sociopaths and psychopaths like Tim Waltz. And that starts with just group organization. That starts on conversations like this. So I got a private platform, socialredpill.com, that we talk about a lot of this stuff all the time out there. So if people are interested in collaborating on those things, I'm pretty sure that we could start having those discussions here on X and bringing those forth, especially when we move towards election season. Pete, we need to get those local candidates out here. We need to get them the support. We need to go out there and help them go door to door. We need to find candidates who have moved from candidacy to actual position and find out what they did and what worked, and have them guide and coach all these other people that want to go out there and make a difference in the world. I think that's what's really going to count.
Yeah, we also need a judicial system that they can trust, that they're not going to be fucked over and their family's going to be taken out. There's no trust and safety, and we need to bring that back as well. And it's great to know you're in Minnesota. So I'll mic off. Thanks again, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Josh. All right. Anybody else want to ask Josh a question while he's here? Everybody, how you doing on time, Josh? I know you said an hour, but how you doing, my friend?
I do got to roll in a few minutes here.
Okay. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to request a mic. I will unmute your mic. Otherwise, we will get Josh back on here, when his time permits. I know he's a busy guy, but Josh, it doesn't look like anybody's requesting a mic. So we'll get you back on here. I don't know. We can get you on in 2 weeks. We can get you on in a month. You let me know.
Let's
You
do a
brought the
month.
fire.
Glad I did. But I'm in Florida this week. I'm speaking at an event tomorrow at Trump Doral.
Yeah.
So anybody's going to be out there at Trump Doral tomorrow for the True Seekers Conference. I'll see you then. Hope to meet you. Other than that, I hope you guys all enjoyed the conversation. And don't forget to go ahead and give me a follow and check out my links. And thanks so much. Appreciate you guys. Much love. Take care.
All right, Josh, we'll get you back on here. Thank you for being here. And everybody, thank you for joining. And watch for the replay. I will upload it to all the social medias as well as the podcast host. Thank
Jenny,
you. Yes, go ahead.
Jenny, I wanted
Santino.
to say there's two things. When Josh was speaking, I posted two things in the bottom pill. One that deals with 1 second, as Hunter Biden's law investigate for a pandemic firm, collaborating with EcoHealth, and then also the website for the Nathan Wolf. So those two things. But when he was talking, I found this absolutely ironic. Two posts popped up that are breaking. The first one is Hunter Biden has abruptly dropped his lawsuit against the IRS, a move whistleblowers say shows everything you need to know. But right after that, playing the Trump card, China makes stunning accusations about which country should be blamed for COVID outbreak. It stated that the fingers of the USA, United States, originating COVID-19 on Wednesday, claiming was attempted to shift the blame after President Trump declared the deadly disease and leaked from the Wuhan lab. So it's interesting that when he was discussing these things, those things popped up. So I just want to let him know that, but he's already left.
Wow, thank you for that, Santino. That's good stuff. And are those in the purple pill or the nest? I see 'em right here.
Yeah, I posted the two ones that they're actually really good. There's a video talking about Nathan Wolf. Then the one above is actually even better, but it gives more of a specific when it talks about Hunter Biden, the Wine Lab, Joe Biden. But this is interesting. I want to read this out because people need to understand this. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell connects the Wuhan lab, metabiota global virus, and members of the Terra Mar Project and Wolf. Thanks, Boris Nikolic, in his book, who is the executor, I'll repeat that, the executor of Jeffrey Epstein's will. The names that are mentioned in the will are Epstein, Maxwell, Bill Gates, George Tenet, Hunter Biden, Dr. Joseph Fair, Shi Zhengzi, whatever, Peter Daszak, Robert Langler, and Boris Nikolic are both co-founders of the Particularly of Humanity, which developed skin-bedded vaccines records. And there's a whole clip on there. So it's really interesting when you look back at how they're all connected. So I want to echo that, but the one above, which is the picture, that one goes to more detail that what Joshua was talking about. It goes in more detail with the Biden, all the webs that are interested, and then also, and this is one more thing I was going to post it, but I haven't done it yet. This is interesting that Ukraine wiped out all metabiota documentation in 2022. Everything that had to do with metabiota. So, and I have
Go
a
figure.
lengthy, but yeah, exactly.
Go figure. Thank you, Santino. All right. Hello, Captain. I saw you request a mic. Go for it, my friend.
Yeah, how are you
What's
guys?
up?
And so basically, just saying today, when you asked me about the confirmation of the Ukraine US
Yeah.
deal, it was inked today and it was confirmed while we were in the middle of our meeting. So, as I said, these things are already done, but they were released while we were having that chat earlier today. So, there again, all these things are already done. It's just a matter of when they're going to release them to the public. But
Thank you for that. Thank you for that confirmation, Captain. And real quick, everybody here, Captain Kyle and I, we had a show earlier, and basically, what we're saying, and many people say, this is already done. It just has to be rolled out to the public strategically, right, methodically, and hence the enjoy the show. It's like we're literally watching a production roll out in front of us. So when we say that the negotiations and everything are done, they're already done. They're just drip, 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 flood, right? So that's what Captain's trying to let everybody know. Don't
Which
panic. It's
specific
already done. Hang
which
on, Cassandra.
which
Hang on.
specific negotiations? Just so everybody's clear. I'm
Well,
not clear.
well, he just said it was the we were talking about it in the podcast earlier. The Ukraine and the United States. Ukraine agreed to sign over the minerals to Trump.
that is correct. And so we are signed deal, not an agreement. And that was actually confirmed even on the mainstream media about 6:30, 7 o'clock tonight.
So that's huge, everybody. And it's like Captain says, it was right in the middle when we were doing our podcast earlier over there on Telegram. So things are happening, everybody. And Josh, he brought the fire. I mean, he broke down things like I said, I have 3 pages of notes here. And if you guys aren't following Captain Kyle here too, give him a follow because he gives you great information as well. If you haven't heard Captain Kyle, you need to check out Captain Kyle because he's bringing the fire as well. So. Captain, I appreciate you being here. I see Kelly's in here. Thank you, Kelly, for being here. Jersey, Carrie, nice to see all you guys. And of course, Santino, God bless you. Thank you for being here and being a co-host always.
It's my pleasure. I love being with you guys. You guys bring so much information to the table. It's an honor to be around all these great patriots.
Well, everybody, we'll talk to you guys soon. We will have I'll have 2 more shows on Friday. They will all be on Telegram. So come check us out over at the Revival of America on Telegram. And thank you all for being here. God bless you all, and we'll talk soon. Thank you, Santino. Thanks, Captain. Thanks, Kelly.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.